Naturally, we couldn't not start with a standout vehicle, for many of us at least, probably not all, but certainly a car which for me was even better than I thought it was going to be. I expected decent to good things, and it's fantastic. I mean, in standard form, I might even say, and of course you can hear my thoughts about the car more so in stock form on Thursday, when I reviewed the entire update. This time around, I'm driving it in the same event, but basically fully tuned aside from the tyres, which are still sports, as you can see at the lower part of the screen. Comparing the two though, as I was saying just now, I think I might prefer the standard one. I mean, yeah, obviously it's quicker when you fully modify it. You're looking at 634 horsepower in an 1100 kilo front-wheel drive sports saloon, which is a hell of a combination. That's essentially like Lambo LP640 power, but in a car that weighs near enough half a ton less than that and has all of that power and torque going through the front wheels only. I will say you can definitely feel that kind of traditional expected front-wheel drive torque steer, certainly again on sports tyres, and incidentally in that fully built form on said sports tyres, so exactly what you can see here, it's 618 points. Fairly modest for a car with this kind of performance. In fact, it's not that crazy of a hike over what it is standard. 618 in this build, and yet in standard form at 1450 kilos, which is still good for a car these days, 276 horsepower, so not quite a third, but not too far off a third of the power of fully built. It's 500 points. So not a crazy difference, 500 to 618. It is a very, very cheap car as well. In fact, it's as cheap as you'd usually expect Japanese performance cars to be in a Gran Turismo game at 36 grand. So basically it's an open and shut case of really good value. It just is a really solid car, and I'm happy about that for two reasons. Well, kind of three in fact. One, I always like having a vehicle which you didn't know you wanted. That's something which I've said a bunch of times about Gran Turismo and kind of, you know, on YouTube and whatever the case may be. If you as a creative can provide something for your community that they didn't know they wanted yet, which is always a risk, when it turns out that they actually love it, it's always great. And in the case of this car, well, of course there weren't a huge amount of people clamoring for an Elantra N, but now most of us, the vast majority from what I've seen, seem to really love the car. And I'm sure some of those did want it, but I wouldn't imagine it would be in necessarily the top 10 vehicles that they wanted the most for the majority of Gran Turismo players, and yet it is for many the standout here. As far as comparing it to its standard form, there's something about the purity of that version where you can really feel like the manufacturer's intention, or at least the Gran Turismo and Polyphony rendering, if you will, of that intention, and it feels great. It's so well set up. It really feels like one of those cars that you almost don't want to do anything to because you just kind of enjoy it as is, and that really is a testament to how good it already is to begin with. In fact, in fully built form, I would say the car almost becomes a bit more expected, and not underwhelming necessarily, but not quite as remarkable, because with a 600 horsepower, 1100 kilo front wheel drive car or not, even if it were four wheel drive, well, you know it's going to be quick. In front wheel drive form, you know it's going to be a bit heavier through corners, it's going to spin up the wheels. You can definitely see and hear that a lot here in the video, but in standard form, it really feels like everything's just right. And if I were to advise people how to build the car, I would essentially probably just say do the two things which pretty much any car can benefit from: more powerful brakes and better tyres. Not that it really needs either of those things, but they always do make an improvement. In terms of handling, in terms of the diff, in terms of the power even, it really doesn't feel like you need to increase it by much, which could well mean that this may well end up being like your go-to 500 point machine, certainly if you're talking front wheel drive cars. And even for me, as much as I often talk about how much I love the fictional Mugen build that I did for the newer shape 4-door Civic Type R, this is pretty close. I think I do still overall prefer that Mugen build because it's just kind of old school Gran Turismo in that sense, but this one, it's pretty close. And the fact that it's such a more modern take on a less expected manufacturer, Hyundai have gone from strength to strength in recent years, and I also like the fact, to go back to the points I was making earlier on, I like that this almost makes up for the Ioniq, because the Ioniq was one of those cars that I was looking forward to, and it is fun, but it's still a big heavy car. There's not too much that you can do to it. Of course it's powerful anyway, but you know what I mean. This one, it just feels more versatile. It's more traditional with that turbo engine, front wheel drive. It feels like kind of the last holdout, the last gasp of traditional old school, almost hot hatches, but just in more of a sports saloon platform. I don't know if I'd go so far as to calling it a super saloon. I don't think it's really that level, although ironically it's probably about as quick as many super saloons used to be 20 years ago, which is the mid-2000s, as crazy as that is to think about, around a track. But like I said, I wouldn't quite call it a super saloon. It's definitely deserving of being called a sports saloon though. That's exactly what it is. And as far as the visual mods go, you can personalize it very nicely. You could do replicas, like the TCR style build, you could wide body it, almost a Liberty Walk kind of vibe. It really is just an absolute pleasure to work with. Like I said on Thursday, this and the Opal are definitely the standouts for me. All five you can find redeeming things for, as always, but those two really are the standouts. The Opal, which we'll talk about tomorrow, I think just in terms of the shock factor of how good it is as a VGT, this one in the shock factor as like a car which you know should be decent, but ends up being really good instead. That's it for my thoughts though on the Elantra N. I would love to hear yours down below. Maybe if you're not a fan of the car, because usually there's at least a few people who don't like something. I'd be curious to hear why. Maybe you're not a fan of front wheel drive in general, I guess. Aside from that, that's it for my thoughts on this car, and I'll see you tomorrow with said Opel Vision GT car, and then of course the other cars thereafter. But for now, thanks for watching.